Hi, have you ever wondered what it takes to get homeowners insurance when you're wanting to purchase a home? Whether you already currently own a home or you're thinking about purchasing a home, there are certain things you need to know about just home insurance. I'm Sherry Smith here with Real Estate Professionals of Tennessee in Cookeville. I have invited Phil Marshall, who is an agent with State Farm, and we are going to answer those questions for you. So Phil, thank you so much for coming and talking to us about home insurance. It's probably not everybody's favorite topic, but it's something that's very important when you're wanting to buy a home.
It is.
So my questions first are going to start off. I am going to send you, have a buyer call you, say I'm thinking about purchasing a home, and you say what to them?
Well, if I don't already know them, I'm just going to simply start with the basics. Who's buying the house? What's your name? And what is the address of the property? And then from there, once we kind of get that in our database, then we look at, is this a house you're moving into? Are you going to rent it out? Is this going to be commercial property, or are you putting a business in it? So we'll make sure we're on the same page right from the beginning.
That's good questions to ask, and hopefully they know the answers to those questions. So you've got all the information. You've got all that. And so a lot of times when buyers are getting loans from a lender, the lender asks them to have proof of insurance so they can turn that into the underwriter.
Right.
What does that mean?
Well, basically, we're going to have to go through and look at the house. We would call it the risk. Look at what you're insuring, and then we would have to figure up a price, what we're going to insure the house for, and get the loan information. Who's the lender? What bank are you working with? What's the loan number going to be? And so I would be with the client, and we would agree on what we're insuring the house for, who their lender is, and then we would send a binder or an insurance declaration page, depending on who you're speaking to. It's the same thing, just different verbiage. We would send that over to the lender saying, hey, we're going to close in 30 days. This is the projected closing date. So they know that an insurance carrier has agreed to insure this home on a certain date when they close.
So it's a little scary when you think about home ownership and then home insurance. So they're thinking about buying this home that's $200,000, and you go to the home and look at the home, and you see the roof is got a lot of wear on it. The HVAC doesn't work. What are some of the things that you need, you look at when you go assess the home?
Yeah, first of all, when we go look at the home, we're looking at two things. Is it eligible? Is it in good shape? Believe it or not, I start at the top and work down. So the roof is the first thing I looked at. So does it need a new roof? So we're looking at that from an eligibility standpoint. Is this something that me as an agent or the company that we represent or that your agent represents is going to insure this house based on the condition it's in? Start at the top and work down. So then I'm looking at what am I going to insure the house for? What's the dollar amount? So we have a software that we use nationwide, and we start with what year was the house built?
So that makes a difference?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So we're looking, is this a 60-year-old home, or was it built 6 months ago? Then we're looking at the square footage, the living square footage, and then things that are not living square footage. Does it have a garage? Does it have a porch? Does it have a patio? These things that are part of the house that you're paying for, but they're maybe not under air. So we go through and then we look at, is it on a basement? Is it built on a crawl space? Is it on a slab? So we're trying to punch in the characteristics of this house, much like a contractor would, and say, what's it going to cost me to build this house back? So when you're looking at insurance, you keep in mind that if the house is gone, right, it burns down or the tornado takes it, you're wanting to build it back. So that's what we're looking at, is what's it going to cost to build this house back today? So once we get all that information in there, and then there's a quality factor. You have just a basic house, a little square ranch that's maybe 1,000 square feet, that's just very simple and basic house inside. And then you have a really nice house that's $400,000, $600,000, $1 million, that when you get into that, the furnishings are much nicer. You're looking at, quartz countertops and granite countertops and really high-end fixtures. You're looking at more expensive flooring. You're looking at higher ceilings. All of this is pushing that value of that house up. We want to make sure we're insuring it for a proper amount. So that's very important. When you insure the house, if it's not here tomorrow, do you have enough insurance to build it back?
Ah.
And that's one of the first things we're looking at. We want to make sure you're covered.
So I had a buyer ask, as far as insurance is concerned, is what is the difference? Does insurance cost more if you live in the city or in a rural area? Which would get cheaper insurance?
Yeah, and I wish I could give you a yes/no answer on that, because a lot of factors go in to the rate, what you pay for insurance. So let's say you and I are neighbors, and we bought the same exact house for the same dollar amount. We could actually have a different rate, because it's going to look at claim. Have you had any claims in the past?
Can you find that out? What if I buy a house and there's a water leak on it, but they didn't disclose that in the disclosure? Can you find that out if they claimed insurance against that house?
Yeah, sometimes we can, because when we go to figure out a rate for the buyer, the purchaser, we're looking at that person's track record, so to speak. So if they had any claims, if they had any fires, if they had any break-ins, did a tree hit the house, much like your car insurance, we're going to look at your driving record.
Oh.
Okay? So we're going to do that, and then we're also looking at the address of this location. So sometimes I'll punch in the address 123 Main Street, and a claim will pull up. Now, you don't even own the house, and it wasn't from where you live now, but it's looking at that house. It's looking at that address, and so we can distinguish. Now, that doesn't hurt you. I'll say, oh, I could see there was a roof claim for $8,000, and you may say, well, that's great because they just put a roof on. Well, that's probably why. So, and then sometimes the buyer will know that, and sometimes they won't.
Is that good for a buyer to ask that question on a house that they're thinking about purchasing, about if there has been any claims against the property?
I think that would be good for, if nothing else, when they're buying it from the seller. Asking them, just like you wanting to disclose, has there been any water damage or any mold or any property line issues, things of that nature that you would look at just overall.
Because we would like to think that every seller is completely honest,
right,
and disclose everything about the house, but reality, it doesn't always add up to
probably
that.
Not.
So it might be not a bad idea for a buyer to ask you to look and see if there's been any claims against that property, because there might be something that's ongoing. You might be able to see if there's been several problems with water, maybe due to drainage or something.
Right.
Which actually brings me to my next question, water. On every property condition disclosure that a seller fills out, there is a question on there that says, is the property in a flood zone? What does that mean as far as insurance is concerned?
Right. So to start with, your home insurance does not cover flood.
What?
Let's just put that up front right now. I don't care what company you have insurance with on your house is not covered for flood.
Now explain what you mean by flood. What is that definition?
That's a good point. So first of all, the flood insurance is, you have to go through the National Flood Insurance Program to obtain a flood policy to cover water damage to your house. Now let's talk about what kinds of water damage. So flood is water, think of it, the water hit the ground outside your house and then came in. So they just had a Hurricane Ida down in Louisiana. That is flood water coming into a house, and it's now 2, 3, 4 feet deep in the house. So the creek went over the bank, the lake rose, there was a lot of rain in a short amount of time, and water came from outside on the ground level into your house. That is flood. Now the National Flood Insurance Program, which is actually monitored by FEMA, we hear FEMA all the time with disasters, that's who services it, and they have definitions of what is flood. So it can't be just my house, it's got to be at least 2 residents or 2 acres. So if you had water come into your house, the National Flood Insurance Program is not going to cover that, because they're looking at massive disasters.
Okay.
So you have to look at that separately, and how you can determine if you're in a flood zone. In Tennessee, we can actually go to the real estate assessment data, and you can pull up a map, and it will show the location of that property. And then at the very top, and anybody can do this, there's a button up there that talks about flood zones. And when you hit that button, basically a blue overlay will come over that area if you're in a flood zone. So if you're by a creek or by a river or on a lake or any body of water, you particularly need to pay attention to that. Now, anybody can get flood insurance. My house is not in a flood zone. My office is not in a flood zone. Okay, but there are preferred areas and not preferred areas. Okay, areas that have flooded in the past, areas that have not flooded in the past. So if you're not in a flood zone, you can still get flood insurance. Okay, and it's less expensive. Usually how people find out if they're in a flood zone is from their lender. Because the lender's going to research that and go, hey, you're in a flood zone, you need flood insurance before we're going to lend you this money. Okay, so that's usually, so now you're looking at home insurance and you're looking to get a flood insurance.
It's 2 separate policies.
It's 2 separate policies written from your insurance carrier and one written through the government through the National Flood Insurance Program.
Okay, so you mentioned before that water in a house is different from having water come in from an outside source to the house.
Yeah.
So explain what you mean. So your homeowner insurance does cover what if there's water in the house?
Yeah, so I'm going to call it interior water damage. Okay. So everybody has plumbing. So your supply line to your sink or your toilet bust, you're on work at work or on vacation, you come home, there's water all in the house from a busted pipe. We cover that. Okay, so you get to fix the pipe, and we're going to take care of the damage that the water created. Okay, or a tree knocks a hole in your roof, and it's just raining cats and dogs outside, and water's coming in. There's no way you can get out to stop that. It's coming. Okay, so that came through an opening in your house created from that tree. Keep in mind that water never hit the ground like it did when it rained and it flooded, or it came out of the creek. So usually flood water is dirty.
Okay.
You know, it's bringing all the mud and the debris and everything with it, like we see on TV from the hurricanes or flooded areas when rivers flood. So you need flood insurance for that.
So is one last question on the water, because water is so scary.
Right.
Septic. We here in Tennessee, especially, I say a majority of our homes are on a septic.
Right.
So does homeowners insurance cover when the septic backs up and the water? Because that's dirty water too.
It is dirty water, and that's a great question. So let's separate 2 things. If you buy a house, you're either on a septic system, which is just for that house, or you're on the sewer system if you're maybe in the city or a little more metro, and that's a sewer system. So we're going to distinguish the 2. If either one of those back up, if you're on a septic system, that's part of your real estate. You own it. You maintain it. Our company covers your septic system backing up. Okay? You don't need to do anything else. If you're on a sewer system, like in the city, we have an endorsement or an additional rider to put on the policy. It is not expensive that you must have on there if the city sewer system backs up. And when's it going to back up? Probably when it rains a lot. There's a lot of debris going into the sewer system, branches and leaves and trash, and the city just can't get it cleared out, so it's going to start backing up, and it's going to find the first house and then the second house, and the water's going to take the easiest path of resistance, and it's going to start coming up in your bathtub or your shower, the lowest point in your house, and you need that endorsement to cover backup of sewer and drains. Now keep in mind, if you're on a septic system, you don't need that rider because that's your property.
Okay, so you would cover that as something like that?
Yes.
If you had a septic and it was to back up in there.
But I would say check with your insurance provider to make sure that you're asking these questions, because their policy may be different from our policy. So know what questions to ask.
Right.
Sure.
That's why we're here. That's why we're asking.
Yeah.
So I did have another buyer ask me a question. They said I mentioned to you, is insurance different if you're in the county or in the city, and there is a difference in how much could be. Right. So is there a difference if you're buying, let's say, a condo that you share a wall with someone? We have a lot in our area, 0 lot line homes, where there's a little bitty space, gap in between. On the outside you couldn't tell, but there is a space between separating the 2, and then a single family dwelling. Is there different policies for those type of things, or is it just all considered a single family home?
And we'll have to kind of separate condo, because I see a lot of them around here are you're actually buying the unit with a shared wall. We would write that as a homeowners.
Okay.
Okay, there's a lot of them in the Cookeville area that somebody lives on the right of you, somebody lives on the left. Very similar to a condo, but they're individual units that are sold. We still write that as a home insurance policy, just as if you owned a detached home in a neighborhood. Now, there are condominium policies, and we think of them at the beach. You know, we go stay at the beach. There's a big condo building that's 10 stories tall. The owner of the building has the building insured. And then there's actually a condominium unit owner policy. Okay, so you've now bought a condo. They take care of the building. And so we insure, think of it this way, from the paint in. Because if something happens to the building, the condo association is going to rebuild that building, but you're responsible for anything on the inside, the flooring, the cabinets, your contents. So if you upgrade
your condo to granite countertop and the rest of them have Formica countertops, then your condo's probably insured for more because it's inside the paint.
Very much.
Okay.
Very much
That's
so.
good.
So
that's good to know.
Yeah.
I got one last question.